Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Undergraduate Town Hall. Whether you're tuning in from Providence, Rhode Island, or from anywhere around the world, thank you for taking the time to join the Brown community for this important discussion. My name is Olugbenga Joseph, and I'm Assistant to the President for Special Projects. In this capacity, I work with President Paxson around student engagement, and along with the President and Vice President of UCS, I will be moderating today's discussion. Now, before we begin, I wanted to lay a couple important ground rules as well as provide an order of events. First things first, this event is live and is being recorded, and as you can see below, captioning is provided. Second, in terms of our sequence of events, we will first hear remarks from President and Vice President of UCS. Second, we will hear some remarks from President Paxson. And to close our discussion, we'll have an extended Q&A between students and our panel of Brown administrators, as you can see on the slide, who will be joining us later in this discussion. Now, if you have any questions at any point during this town hall, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We'll do our best to cover as many questions as possible during our allotted time. And now to begin our town hall, I would like to now turn it over to UCS President Jason Carroll and UCS Vice President Summer Dye to deliver some remarks.
Thank you so much, Olugbenga. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today at the Undergraduate Council of Students Town Hall. My name is Summer, and I'm honored to be serving as the Student Body Vice President this year. The Undergraduate Council of Students is Brown's student government dedicated to serving and representing the Brown undergraduate community. Our work includes advocating for students in shaping university policies, recognizing and categorizing student groups on campus, as well as running events and services for the Brown community. In the past couple of months, we've been working closely with different departments of the university to ensure and increase accessibility for campus resources. In collaboration with the Undergraduate Finance Board, we've also expanded funding access to all newly established student groups on campus. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all the student organizations who have been working so hard to build a virtual community when we're physically apart, and to all the faculty and staff who have been working around the clock since March to ensure that we can maximize our student experience. And before we introduce our panelists, please join me in welcoming Jason Carroll, our student body president, to give his remarks.
Thank you so much, Summer. My name is Jason Carroll, and I have the pleasure of serving as the student body president. It's an honor and privilege to serve the student body for the 2020-2021 academic year and to sit here with this panel today. I'll tell you firsthand, this wasn't how I envisioned the beginning of my senior year or my presidency. I truly empathize with my peers who have shared their anxieties and concerns about how the current status of the world would both impact them as students, but more importantly as people. I hope the opportunities to connect directly with Brown's leadership can give some clarity to some of these questions, but more importantly, build a much needed connection in our virtual format. I'd like to take my brief moment with you all before town hall to highlight some of the incredible acts of kindness and service that I've seen performed by our community for one another. During this time, I've been astounded by the compassion of our community. One such example is that of Hope Clark. Hope works for APG, who are the folks commonly seen around campus in yellow jackets and who work in various campus spaces like the Science Library lobby swipe card desk. When the university made its announcement that campus was closing back in March, Hope took a week of her free time to help students move out, using her car to help students get their belongings to storage and to the airport. Further, I can remember dozens of examples of Brown administrators who put in weeks of overtime to help support students following the closure of campus. And most poignantly, the thousands of Brown community members who organized their support for others virtually through Facebook groups. One such example was the Brown University Shared Resources page, where members of our community offer to help each other with free and subsidized housing, transportation, storage, and other resources. That group now has over 2,000 members. I often say that my favorite part of Brown is our people. I thank each and every one of you who was able to help another Brown member of our community get through this time. I think it's what we need more of. Today, we have an excellent opportunity to discuss some of the biggest issues and concerns on the minds of students and discuss our future as a community. I'm very excited to welcome you all at our esteemed panel. Without further ado, please welcome me in joining Brown University's 19th President, Christina H. Paxson, who will now give her opening remarks.
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank Jason and Summer for the incredible work that you are doing and that UCS is doing. You've been just marvelous throughout this period. Now, I'm most looking forward to the Q&A portion of this event, so I'm going to keep my remarks short. I thought I would do is start with some updates about how I'm thinking about the year ahead into the spring, and a little bit about priorities for the year, what we're doing and focusing on to make Brown a stronger university, and as Jason talked about, a stronger community, which is really important. I just want to begin by recognizing how difficult the end of the last academic year and the beginning of this academic year have been. The pandemic has affected many of your families. It's affected all of you in sometimes really devastating ways. And over the past several months, in addition, I know you faced a lot of uncertainty, some of it due to changes in university decisions that were prompted by the pandemic, which we don't control. And many of you have had to make hard decisions and put things on hold that you wanted to do sooner rather than later. And I'm sorry for that. It's not what you signed on for. And hopefully we can all get together, get through this together and come out as a stronger community. So let me tell you a little bit about where we are right now. So we have about 1,100 undergraduate students on campus, another 2,200 are off campus but in Providence, and about another 1,600 are studying remotely. 500 students or so have taken leaves, and then of course we have our 1,750 first-year students who we're so looking forward to welcoming to campus soon. So the point is, we are scattered. We are scattered right now, and that's something that we're having to confront. And I know some of the questions are going to address that. Now, I know that many of you have questions about what the spring semester will look like. And at this point, we're still working that out. And I expect to be able to tell you more by the end of this month. But as many of you know, we're in a really precarious position right now as a country and globally. So in Rhode Island, the positivity rate is up. There are increases in cases. In many states, cases are going up, hospitalizations, and in some cases, deaths as well, sadly. And this pandemic is not going to just disappear anytime soon. So that's one important point to make. But on the other hand, at Brown, we're doing well. And that's in large part because you're taking this situation seriously. You are following the public health guidance in a really remarkable way. I take walks around campus. If you see me with a black and white poodle that's named Cooper, say hi. Nearly every student I've seen is wearing a mask and doing the right thing. The reports of violations of our public health protocols have been remarkably few. And the testing program has been going well. And, again, I go to get my tests and I see students coming and going. We've done more than 76,000 tests since August. Most times the results are returned within 24 hours. Positivity rate is extremely low, less than 1%. And by comparison, in Rhode Island, the statewide positivity rate is 2.4%. So that's all good. Now, I hope you all know that you can follow these results by going to the COVID-19 dashboard on the Healthy Brown website. And there's actually another really great app that you might want to look up. It's called My COVID Risk. It was developed by the Warren Alpert Medical School and Lifespan, and you can put in what activity you're planning to do, and it'll calculate how much risk is involved. And it's actually a great way to keep yourself in check. The fact that we're doing so well is a testament to how committed Brown students are to protecting each other, Brown employees, from dining service workers to custodians to your professors, as well as the greater Providence community. And, we need your help. And indeed, we need the help of all members of our community in keeping the campus healthy and continuing the great work. Now, I do have to note, there is a risk coming up in just a few weeks. And that risk is called Halloween. This is usually a big night for parties at Brown. I'm used to kind of walking out on campus and seeing students dressed up as Blue No and other things like that. And then also things like the Midnight Organ Recital in Sales Hall. And we're going to have to celebrate Halloween differently and safely this year. Next Friday, we're going to have some grab and go fall treats outside. We're going to have a socially distanced pumpkin carving contest. And the Midnight Halloween Organ Recital will take place, sadly, virtually, but it'll be Mark Steinbach, as always, streaming the performance this year from Sales Hall. So, I won't say much more about this, but I guess, seriously, this is not time to let your guard down. Keep your social groups small, keep them non-overlapping, mask up when you're around people outside of your pod, and generally keep up the great work. The success of the rest of the academic year depends on it. It's important. Now, we could talk about COVID all the time, and clearly it's one of the most important and complex issues we're dealing with this year. But even if we put the pandemic aside, even putting that aside, this is still a challenging time. We're in the midst of a very contentious presidential election. We're seeing a long overdue national reckoning on anti-Black racism, which I think is very important. This is a challenging time for international students, and I really want to call that out here. Students who can't vote, but for whom the issues at stake right now are so important. US tensions with China have made it an especially difficult experience for Chinese students. And, I want you to know that Brown supports you. Students overall don't always see the advocacy work that we do as a university to maintain the truly global nature of the university. And I want you to be just to know that Brown is doing everything it can to keep our campus strong and protect our students, whether they're international students, DACA students, Black students, you name it. Okay, before I stop, let me touch on 4 specific things that I think are important this year. First, I already mentioned civic engagement. We're just a few weeks out from the presidential election. For many Brown students, in fact, probably most of you, this will be the first time you voted in a presidential election. So it's exciting. Hopefully you've noticed that the faculty voted to make Election Day a university holiday. And that's not just for this year, it'll apply to all future federal election years. But this year is different. And one way it's different is there's so many different ways to vote. Mail-in voting, early voting. For those of you who are on campus and registered to vote in Rhode Island, the Pizzatola is a polling location. If you're off campus, you can look it up on the Secretary of State's website. And the Swearer Center can give you fantastic information about how you can vote if you're from another state, registered in another state. We also know that the election, depending on the outcome, we're going to need to have a lot of discussions afterwards to talk about, what's going on, when are we going to find out who the winner is, if it takes days, maybe even weeks. So we'll have a lot of resources available for our community to kind of work through what's happening in real time as we move through this very, very unusual election. So that's point 1. Point 2 is on racial injustice. And one of the most pressing issues we're facing today as a community and as a nation is systemic racism. These issues certainly are not new. In fact, they're hundreds of years old. But the brutal murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others have brought a justified and renewed focus to the reality that people of color, and especially Black people, what they deal with every day. We recognize that for members of our community, these events are extremely difficult to process. For many people on a personal level, we want to make sure that we have the resources available for support. And we also recognize that it's part of our responsibility as a university community to actively address the impacts of systemic racism and ensure that all members of this community are valued and respected and have access to all opportunities. We have a number of efforts underway, and there will be more to come. A task force will be delivering recommendations on what Brown can do to address anti-Black racism in ways that reflect our mission of education, scholarship, and service. We have a new fund to support research and programming on anti-Black racism at Brown and beyond Brown's campus. There's a great virtual campus conversation series led by the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America and the Provost's office on the topic of race. The next installment comes right after the election. It's on November 4th, and it'll cover the very timely issue of race and social movements. And for any first years who are on, you know that we've made the Slavery and Justice Report, which examines Brown's historic ties to the transatlantic slave trade. And it was just a really important publication when it came out. This is now the selection for the 2020 First Readings Program. And I would encourage any student who hasn't read that report before to go online and read it. Third point, we're working with Providence schools really closely. And many of you know that we've had a long-standing relationship with PPSD. And as part of the Slavery and Justice Report, Brown established the Fund for the Education of the Children of Providence. And that was to enable continuous improvement in teaching and learning of students in Brown's home city. Very important commitment. Earlier this year, we announced that we have endowed the fund at a $10 million level, which is terrific. One of the first projects we're doing is to improve the Hope High School Library and Media Center. So we have a team from Brown currently working with the principal and staff, and most importantly, Hope High School students. They conducted a site visit at Hope, and the project will be completed in the spring of 2021. Now, I don't want to leave you with the impression that that's the only thing we're going to be doing. And in fact, we're putting together a committee that will involve students, faculty, staff, community members to talk about how we can continue to build our support for PPSD. The fourth point I want to make is around policing. And there's a really important debate going on across the country about, what kind of policing do we want to have? Even before that debate began in earnest, we had commissioned an external review of the Department of Public Safety, as we do in so many areas. We do this for lots of different academic and administrative units to look at how well the department's functioning, how it fits into the Brown University structure, or their opportunities for improvement. In light of this very critical debate that's going on across the country, I think it's important for the community to have an opportunity to give input about, whether there are changes that we need to make, some relatively soon, some that might take more time. It's extremely important that our students feel safe on campus. It's extremely important that they, as well as faculty and staff and our neighbors in the East Side, have an important opportunity to weigh in throughout the process. So what we're doing is using the Brown University Community Council as a vehicle to have this sort of conversation, information sharing, and engagement. You'll learn more about that in the coming weeks. So I'm excited about that. Now, finally, I just want to leave you with the point that, Brown is doing really important work in teaching and research that we do all the time. And when you look at what's happening in the world right now, all of the challenges that I noted, what it tells me is that the work that happens at universities is more important than ever. And this is on things like public health and like climate change, like the economy, like the arts, and some of the other issues that I've already mentioned. And I think we can take pride in how Brown is advancing knowledge and understanding on these issues through its education, through its research, through our faculty being leading public voices. That's great. And I think we can also take pride in how Brown is navigating through the significant financial consequences of the pandemic. And we can talk more about that later, but we have a big COVID deficit. We have a good plan to address it. And so far, and hopefully we can navigate through the pandemic without having to take this step, we haven't laid off any regular Brown employees. And I think that's a testament to how tightly knit this community is, how much we care about each other. I was very glad that Jason acknowledged the work of the faculty and the staff. And what I've seen over the spring, over the summer, into the fall, faculty, staff, students who are really working hard to get us through this pandemic in a way that is not just muddling through, but actually learning, continuing to improve, and becoming stronger. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you for those remarks, President Paxson. Now, with the conclusion of remarks from Jason Summer and President Paxson, I would now like to transition us into the Q&A portion of our town hall. Along with President Paxson, we've invited a panel of Brown administrators to answer the various questions, and I mean various, that you posed in advance and during this event. Now let's begin with introductions. Panelists, please remember to unmute your mics, and in your introductions, please provide your name, your role at Brown, and a couple remarks about what your role entails at the university. For our first introduction, we will have Associate VP Koren Bakkegard.
Thank you, Olabenga. My name is Koren Bakkegard, and I'm the Dean of Students. In that capacity, I oversee student support services, student conduct and community standards, the Student Activities Office, residential life, and orientation in the first year experience.
Great, thank you, Dean Bakkegard. EVP Carey.
My name is Russell Carey. I'm Vice President for Planning at Brown. I oversee a number of areas, including the Corporation Office, Department of Public Safety, Community and Government Relations, and also related to the pandemic, have been overseeing the on-campus testing program and the campus activity level review team.
Thank you. VP Delalue.
My name is Shontay Delalue. I'm Vice President for Institutional Equity and Diversity, and also serving in an interim role as Senior Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Division of Biology and Medicine, assisting the medical school. In my vice presidency role, we oversee two major areas for the university, both the strategic planning around our diversity and inclusion initiatives, as well as compliance, including Title IX, discrimination and harassment, and bias.
Thank you very much. VP Estes.
My name is Eric Estes. I'm the Vice President for Campus Life. It's great to be with you all today. I hope you all are safe and well. I have the great opportunity to work at Brown with colleagues in the Division of Campus Life. It's one of the bigger administrative units of the institution. Has a lot of the resources that work with and build community and focus on health and wellness, working closely with students and colleagues like Dean Steele, who you'll meet in a minute, and Dean Bakkegard. So very, very grateful to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Dean Estes. Provost Locke.
Thanks for taking the time to be on this call. My name is Rick Locke. I have the great privilege to be a professor of political science and international and public affairs, and I also serve as the provost. And the provost at Brown is both the chief academic officer and the chief budget officer. In terms of chief academic officer, that means that my office is in charge of ensuring the quality of our academic programs, the departments, the faculty, the hiring of faculty, promotion of faculty, and the integrity of the academic program. So that's one part. And also as provost, I serve as the chief budget officer, which means that I work with students, faculty, and staff on the University Resources Committee, URC, to develop a budget proposal that goes to the president and then to the Brown Corporation every year, which basically comes up with a proposal to figure out how do we finance the academic and student side of and operational side of the university. So nice to see you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Provost. Associate Dean Joie Steele.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joie Steele. I am the Associate Dean and Director in Student Activities, so I oversee all things related to student organizations, student events on campus, other things that pop up that might need help. And one of my favorite parts of my job is I get to work really closely as the advisor of UCS and UFB. And that has been incredibly rewarding this year. And just a quick shout out to UCS and UFB for all of the work that they have been doing. Most administrations start at the beginning of the year. They have not stopped since March. So it's been really great to work with them.
Thank you, Joie. Dean Zia.
My name is Rashid Zia. I'm a faculty member in engineering and physics. I'm also proud to be a Brown alum, and I serve as Dean of the college. And Dean of the College is the Senior Academic Officer for Undergraduate Education. And working together with my colleagues in the college, as well as in the Center for Careers and Life After Brown, Career Lab, the Office of International Programs, and the Swearer Center for Public Service, we work to support student learning. And our job is to ensure that academic advising and the curriculum are allowing you as individual students to formulate and achieve your educational objectives.
Thank you very much, Dean Zia, and thank you for all those introductions, panelists. We'll also have Dr. Vanesa Britto, who is the Associate Vice President of Campus Life and the Executive Director of Health and Wellness, join our panel later in our Q&A. But to kick off our Q&A, we've selected a couple of questions submitted by students in advance to be read out loud. Each student will read one and exactly one question aloud to be answered by our panelists. For our first question, I would like to now turn it over to Jason Carroll.
Thank you so much, Olabenga. And thank you to the panel for being with us today. I specifically have a question for Vice President Carey, but anyone can feel free to add. This was a question I thought was pertinent to many students, and we received similar questions during registration. What occurs when a member of the Brown community, specifically students located in Providence, test positive for COVID-19?
The first thing is that somebody, if they're in our testing program, which is, let's assume that's the case for this example, they would receive notification through email of their test result. And for a student would then very quickly be followed up with by staff from University Health Services. Just so you know, it's similar for faculty and staff, except that happens through University Human Resources. And so University Health Services is going to be focused on care and support for the student, first and foremost, in terms of what their condition might be. If they're feeling symptoms, I think as is frequently the case in the testing program, people may be testing positive, and of course we still have very few actual incidents of this, but somebody, more often than not, the experience we've had so far, people are testing positive but they're asymptomatic, so they didn't necessarily even know that they potentially had COVID. There's always a possibility of a false positive. We think that's very low as well, but since many people can be asymptomatic throughout, but still be a carrier and still transmit to others. The student's going to, if they're living on campus, they're going to be directed to move to an isolation location, most likely in Minden. And if they're living off campus, they're going to be given direction on how to isolate in their residence and avoid contact with others. And they're also going to be asked about what their contacts have been. And there's actually changing guidance from the CDC that's a little broader in terms of contacts, but a contact is not an inadvertent interaction with someone. It's sustained interaction, typically without a mask, for 15 minutes or more over a period of 24 hours. And then those contacts, in most cases, the number of contacts is single digits. Most of our cases so far are certainly less than 3 to 5 contacts, and oftentimes just single ones or none. But they would have to quarantine for up to 14 days. And then there's all kinds of support in place for people who are in isolation, both in terms of their care, academic support, personal support as well. Again, fortunately, going back to something President Paxson said earlier, because our positive rate has been so low, which is exactly because of people doing what they're supposed to do and protecting themselves and protecting others, we have not had to do this very often so far.
Sure, I don't have much to add to what EVP Carey shared. I think what I would share is just a general sort of approach, and that is that health services and other resources in campus life are, to what my colleague shared, immediately focused on making sure that we're supportive of the student, supportive of both their personal and any kind of medical needs they might have. They're contacted by health services. Health services starts the contact tracing. They'll support any sort of identified contacts. There's the housing piece that my colleague mentioned. And there is a great temporary needs platform that enables students who are in isolation or quarantine housing to share what they need and have those things, whether it's bottled water or a food request or some other sort of supportive requirement, that we're in a position to make sure that we're providing that in a consistent and timely manner. And there's also in the main sort of residence hall where there's isolation and quarantine housing and EMS presence there 24 hours a day. So we really want to make sure that the wraparound support for students in terms of any kind of sort of needs that they might have during a period, which I can imagine, at least initially in particular, might be stressful and anxiety producing, that we're there to make sure that we're being as supportive as we possibly can.
Thank you so much. With that, I think I'm going to pass it to Summer, who also has a question.
I'd like to direct this question to VP Estes and perhaps Dean Bakkegard, but anyone can feel free to add. Could you describe what the moving process and living situation will be like for first-year students arriving in January?
Sure, I'll just make a couple of again, bigger picture comments, and I'd welcome my colleague, Dean Bakkegard, also to sort of join in the answer. I mean, I think we had I think from all reports, a very successful dedensified move-in for this fall semester. It happened in 2 stages. I think in the spring, it will likely happen in 1 phase. But we really did try and create multiple locations where people could check in so that there weren't a lot of people all at once in the same place, sort of gave people blocks of time, when it was ideal for them to show up, make sure that there was a lot of support there in terms of movers to help with, personal items. We encouraged people to bring no more than 2 people to help them move in. So again, to think about the number of people who would be in the same place at the same time. I want to thank our colleagues in events planning who really stepped up to help Res Life and other Campus Life colleagues in terms of the process. So there were multiple staff members at each of, I believe, the 6 or 7 move-in sites in the fall. And so we're going to look to sort of replicate that in 1 move-in in the spring, but really, again, making sure we can do it in a way that's first and foremost healthy and safe, but then also provide students who are moving in a lot of support around how to do so in that type of environment. And I have to say, our colleagues were great in helping. Students and parents were amazing in terms of their support for our trying to sort of follow certain kinds of public health guidelines. People were wearing masks, they were socially distancing. I think the movers were of great assistance when there were some heavier items. So I think it's an example of what we've been highlighting throughout our comments, which is something that logistically is a big deal, is a big effort. Can go really well in terms of safety, but then also just the general logistics when people pitch in and people sort of think about their own safety and the well-being of others as well. So I'll stop there and see if Dean Bakkegard has anything to add.
Sure. I hope you don't mind, Summer, if I take just a minute, because this is a good opportunity. I think we have many of our incoming first-year students on the call today, which we're delighted to have you here as moving in the next phase of your full engagement with Brown. I wanted to make sure everyone knows that we will be sending out a more detailed communication on Tuesday of next week to our first-year students that will give them some more information about pre-registration, about the housing assignment process. We'll be asking first-year students to indicate to us what their preferences are for their housing in January. And that will include an opportunity to identify some neighbors. I know many of our first year students in July and August had lots of questions about pods and how will I form a pod and how will I form friendships. We'll have some information in that communication about the fact that there will be some meet and greets on October 30th and November 6th in the Bruno Beginnings platform for students to meet one another and hopefully identify some potential neighbors who they may want to indicate on their housing questionnaire that they'd like to be assigned near. And it's also fine if you don't, because after students arrive in January, the residential peer leaders and the Bruno leaders will be working very closely with students to help establish a strong sense of community and connection and shared public health practices for our students living together in residence. So the full details about move-in will be coming for first-year students in December when they get their housing assignments. But I also want to make sure that everybody hears and knows that just as we have had for the upper division students living on campus, every first-year student in the spring, we'll have a single occupancy room and we'll have a micro fridge. So everyone will have a personal microwave and refrigerator in their room for their use when they arrive in January. So that should help with the move-in, even though we'll have the movers available to help with students in January as well.
Thank you so much, Dean Bakkegard and VP Estes. Really appreciate your answers. And now we actually have 3 students in the audience today who would like to ask their questions. And the first one is from Jake. Jake, are you there?
Thank you for having me today. My question is with regard to the opportunities for graduating seniors who will be entering the workforce. And given the unprecedented levels of unemployment and the low opportunities for students who are graduating, what is Brown doing to support students who are graduating in the spring or this semester?
Thank you so much, Jake, for your question. President Paxson and Dean Zia, would either of you or both of you like to answer that question?
Yes, I think absolutely. And Jake, I can understand your concern. Let me just say a few high-level things, then I'll turn it to Rashid, who can tell you more about what Career Lab is doing. 2 points that I think are important, and I think one is maybe disturbing, but also reassuring at the same time. If you look at the employment numbers in the United States, there's a real bifurcation, and the vast majority of jobs that are held by highly educated people, which all of you will be when you graduate, have come back largely. The people who are still really struggling are in service jobs, jobs that don't require college degrees. And so that's bad for the country in terms of economic inequality, something I'm really concerned about, but it's good news for our students. If you look at the students from last spring, and Rashid, Dean Zia may know more specifically where we are, but I looked at the numbers and I thought, most of them have jobs or they're in graduate school. So it didn't look that far different from normal. So I think it's, unless things really change, the job market for college graduates looks pretty good. If you want to be an actor, it may be tough, right? I mean, there's some industries that have been hit harder than others. But Dean Zia, what do you have to say?
President Paxson, I agree. If we look, we were fortunate that for many of the graduates of the class of 2020, they were able to go on to either full-time employment or graduate studies or fellowships as they normally do. In a normal year, about 70% of students go on to full-time employment, about 20% go on to graduate or professional school immediately, and about 10% go on to explore other opportunities. And those were similar to the numbers that we saw for the graduates of last year. And as President Paxson says, part of the reason that this happens is that the economy has come back for highly skilled jobs. But please know what this means is that our country needs you now, your creativity, your energy, your generosity, your service and leadership. So know that there are many people that are continuing to engage with Brown, looking for our graduates either for full-time employment, for graduate or professional schools, or for fellowships. And we've actually seen an uptick in the number of applications for example, for professional schools, for medical school this year. We've seen an uptick in the number of applications for fellowship opportunities, and those still exist. Those are endowed positions endowed by many foundations. They will continue to be offered. And I would say that perhaps surprisingly, rather than seeing a downturn in the amount of engagement with Career Lab, we've actually seen an increase in the number of employers reaching out to Career Lab to set up virtual engagement opportunities. And so one of the things that you may have noticed that there, if you look right now in, for example, Handshake, there are something like a dozen or 15 specific virtual events for Brown students. There are another dozen events that are for students from Brown and other institutions. So I'd encourage you to go there and to start participating in those virtual events. It's going to make it possible for you as students today to reach a much broader range of employers than ever before. And rather than doing one big career fair, which has been the practice in Career Lab, we have moved to a process of having smaller monthly career fairs. In the month of November, there'll be 2 career fairs. One is the specific annual engineering fair that's always offered, and then there'll be another smaller career fair. That said, please know that the job search is a personalized process. It is customized to you, and our job at Brown is to help support your individual personal and professional goals. And the way that we do that through Career Lab is through individualized counseling. And right now, the availability for appointments with career counselors in Career Lab is high. You can oftentimes get an appointment within 24 hours. There is no limit to the number of times that you can have one-on-one sessions with the counselors. So I'd encourage you on the call today, those who have friends in these situations, to reach out to Career Lab right now and set up an appointment. And it's not a discussion necessarily just about the job search, but it's about the career that you would like to build. And in that context, what are your interests? What are your values? What are your skills? What do you hope to learn next? And know that your first position after college is just that. It's the first position. And there are lots of pathways that you might pursue. That last little bit that I'd like to plug, though, is remember that in a job market where there may be fewer conventional opportunities, but maybe more people seeking, building your professional network is more important than ever before. And building relationships with alumni, with faculty, with peers, with recruiters. And so I'd encourage you to talk to Career Lab about that process and to get started and to look at all of those range of opportunities at once. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly and I can help to connect you with our colleagues there.
Thank you so much, Dean Zia and President Paxson, for your comments and insights. Next one, we have a question from Sammy. Sammy, would you like to introduce yourself and ask your question?
Yes, this is specifically for President Paxson and Mr. Carey. President Paxson, earlier you said the word systemic racism, and in light of the Providence police ramming an innocent Black man with a patrol car and putting him into a coma, does anyone here think it is moral for Brown to have a licensed and armed private police force that works closely with that same Providence Police Department and one that has Brown University Police systematically target Black and Brown community members based on its own stop data?
Sammy, I'm glad you asked that question. And that's exactly the kind of issue that we're looking at in BUCC. We want to have a safe campus. We are an urban campus. And, I think Vice President Carey can address this. We can't not collaborate, work with the local police because they're the ones who, if you have a break-in in an off-campus apartment, that's the group you call. And we want to be involved in supporting students who have experiences with crime. The issues of anti-Black violence by police, these are really serious issues. And I think it's important that we make sure that members of our community are not treated disparately based on their race, that we don't have profiling. And I've heard a lot from students who have serious and legitimate concerns. That's something that we want to address this year. And hopefully, Sammy, you'll be a part of the conversation. I'll turn it to Vice President Carey.
Just add a couple comments, mostly echoing what President Paxson said. I think, Sammy, probably not accept a couple premises yet of your question. One is that the incident you referred to, the Providence Police, is subject to an ongoing investigation by the Attorney General and the Rhode Island State Police. And although I know many members of the city community have drawn conclusions based on the evidence seen so far, there's not a conclusion yet to that investigation. And I was on a call earlier today with the chief of the Providence Police Department, and they expect to have a conclusion within the next couple of weeks, but I think that is important for people to know. Personally, I don't think the stop data that we analyze on a regular basis and make public on the department's website for Brown would support a conclusion that they're intentionally targeting Black and Brown people. I absolutely understand that people have had negative interactions with police, both on campus and off. And there's a lot of, for Brown, policy and oversight, supervision, discipline, and training to mitigate those negative experiences. But I think absolutely no question that we need to continue to examine ourselves and what, as President Paxson said earlier, what we want from policing on campus and off. We cannot divorce ourselves unless the university moves from being in the jurisdiction of the Providence Police Department. Even if we stopped having a police department of our own, or stopped hiring Providence Police for things like campus dance or commencement or anything where we want to close the street, and we stopped having those type of events, Providence Police, Rhode Island State Police would continue to have jurisdiction over the campus and would respond to incidents of violence, incidents involving firearms, other types of things that do happen, not just in an urban environment, but in any environment in our country. And so I do think having an opportunity to continue to work collaboratively with those departments and seek greater racial justice, greater improvement in community relations is important, because I don't think it's realistic to just say that we won't partner with an agency like that and then not have those And it's not realistic to not partner with an agency like the Providence Police Department.
I just wanted to add quickly from kind of the student activities perspective and work that we're doing with students. I think that reducing our reliance on police and shifting our reliance is a phased approach. And we are absolutely having those conversations. And Sammy, I hope that after this we can connect because we're talking about ways that I think we all agree that people don't all inherently feel safer around police. And so we want to think about alternatives. And you'll notice that through our response to the pandemic, we have really tried to have alternative means of keeping students safe while not having to interact with armed police officers on every corner. And so we've been able to do that. And we're working around event staffing and thinking about what are the times that we really need to have a police presence and what are the times that we really don't, and shifting other ways and thinking about that in residential spaces. And so those conversations are happening. And I really welcome any student who wants to engage in those conversations or who has ideas or thoughts about ways that we can do that. So please feel free to reach out and we can touch base on that.
Thank you so much, Dean Steele, VP Carey, and President Paxson. And thank you, Sammy, for bringing up this very important topic. Moving on to our third student, Rocket, are you here?
Thank you all for being here, and thanks, Sammy, for that excellent question. I'm a junior. I'm a member of Housing Opportunities for People Everywhere, a student organization here at Brown. Here's my question. Since the 1950s, Brown's expansion has displaced low-income communities of color in the neighborhoods around College Hill. This history of gentrification is particularly salient today, given the recent influx of students in the off-campus rental market. The construction of new dorms announced in 2018 and last semester is one step, but I would like to know what else the university is doing to prevent students from displacing longtime renters.
Thank you, Rocket, for that question. And it's an important one. I think, we have expanded over the last 20 years the size of the undergraduate and the graduate population without building more dormitories and housing for graduate students and things like that. And, you said sort of what else can we do besides doing that? I think that is the answer. The answer is to make sure that we have great places where students can live on campus, and also to really think about graduate student housing in a serious way. And we're having those conversations. I'll tell you a story though, and I'd love to get student reactions on this. Professor Chait invited me to come to his class, talk about university governance. And I got this question from a student in the audience. And I said, well, we're building dorms because the goal is to make sure that all first year, second year, and juniors live on campus. And I have to say, the juniors in the audience looked absolutely horrified because they're all looking forward to living off campus. So we're going to have, as we do this, a culture shift where we get back to where we've always wanted to be, which is the university where people expect to live on campus for 3 full years. And that's going to take a little bit of doing, but I think if we build the space, it's a great space, we can make that happen. The graduate medical school issues also need to be addressed because that does put a lot of pressure on the surrounding neighborhood as well.
I can just say a few things just to elaborate on President Paxson's comment. As a group of us administrators, we serve on a committee called the Capital Planning Working Group, where we actually look at the physical plant. And as part of that work, we are planning to pursue what President Paxson mentioned, which is how could we build new dorms and renovate existing dorms so that not only can we house 80% of our students on campus, but also make sure that the students want to live on campus because the dorms have high quality and the right kinds of amenities. We have not built a dorm for several decades, except we just will complete one this spring, the health and wellness dorm, and we're looking at possibilities for building at least 2 other dorms, and that's for undergraduates. As President Paxson mentioned, we're also looking at housing for our graduate and medical school students. And our hope is that if we can offer high quality and attractive and affordable housing on campus for our students, then that will relieve the pressure on the community, especially members of our community who need safe, reliable, and affordable housing.
I just wanted to add and expand on how this is also a collective choice issue, right? So it's not just the residency requirement of the university, but every year we do have a number of juniors and seniors who elect to live on campus. And that choice is one that I hope that they're making for reasons that they find the housing attractive and the community here supportive for that, but is also helping to address this issue. As somebody who lived on campus at Brown for all 4 years, it was an understanding of what the neighborhood around this campus looks like and how our individual choices impact them. And so Rocket, I really appreciate you. I appreciate Hope bringing this issue up. For those who haven't read it, there was an excellent thesis written last year by Nathaniel on this topic that I believe is available online. And I think everyone should read it and we can work together about how to make available resources that would make these choices easier, but how we work together for this shared goal.
Thank you, Dean Zia. And thank you all the students for your great questions that you submitted in advance and during this conversation.
Vice President Carey, did you want to add to that?
Very quickly on the housing question, I do want to say there are a few other things that we are doing and have done over time besides just addition of building residence halls. One is over the last 10 years or so, we've taken a number of houses that were vacant or underutilized and converted or renovated those and then sold them at a reduced price to faculty and staff to get to utilize housing stock on the campus more efficiently and effectively than it had been in the past. We've worked with the city to support zoning changes on College Hill, particularly to allow for greater density around the Thayer Street area. And that has pluses and minuses. And some people may have positive views of some of the housing that's been built by private developers in those areas and not. But greater density is greater efficiency of land use for and for example, 257 Thayer Street has occupancy that's much greater than the properties that were on that site before. And finally, we've worked with a number of projects, particularly River House, which is part of the South Street Landing development, which is a private development, but was instigated by Brown to create more housing that we had hoped would be really appealing to graduate medical students. It has been to a certain extent. We've also leased some of that housing this year to provide housing during the pandemic, but that's a housing that's housing in the city that didn't exist 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, and wouldn't have, frankly, except for Brown's involvement in that project.
Thank you very much. And now I'd actually like to just turn things over to the questions we received, both in the chat and from pre-registered questions. And the first of those is this. The student also wants to thank everyone for attending the event. And then they have a question around international students and folks in different time zones. And so the question is this: while I operate in the Eastern Standard Time, many of my peers work under different time zones and are therefore barred from certain university and club events due to the timing. I was wondering how both UCS and the university as a whole can work to make sure internationals and those in different time zones have as much access to university events as those living in or near the university. So let's actually start with UCS, Jason and Carroll, if you have some remarks, and then we can turn it over to Joie and Dean Zia.
Yeah, I can jump in, and Summer, feel free to share your thoughts. I think for us, we've tried to take a similar approach to what the university has done in terms of academics, and essentially saying, okay, if you cannot be with us at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, let us know, and we will make sure that we run asynchronously so that you can vote, you can give comments, and you can interact with us and engage with us, because you're still a part of our community, even if you're not physically in Eastern Standard Time. I think it is very difficult though. You know, there's no time that's going to work for everybody, even if when we were all in Providence, you know, and now people being across oceans doesn't make that any easier. So I think it is something that we really are working and trying to figure out. Summer, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Echoing what Jason just said. And as an international student myself, I'm fortunate enough to be in Providence this fall. But I definitely have been talking to a lot of international students about time zone differences. And UCS ourselves have been working really hard to like make accommodations. We've actually extended our voting period from 1 hour during the meeting to 24 hours or even more than that, and sending out Google Forms to get people's ideas and perspectives. So if you have any questions, if you're internationally, if you're like tuning in internationally, feel free to reach out to either Jason or me or UCS. We'd be lovely. We'd be happy to talk to you and help you get involved.
Yeah, and I'll quickly say before we pass it off to the administrators, I think also, at least I'll speak for myself, I am available to speak with anyone who wants to outside of, the standard 9 to 5. If you are in a time zone where it's more convenient to chat, even really late at night, I'm willing to make that time and make that commitment so that we can connect.
Joie, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I agree with all that Jason and Summer said. I also just want to emphasize the importance of recording when you can and making sure that those are posted and sent out, whether it's through email to your members or if they're posted somewhere where people can access them. I think that's really, really important. And students have been asking for that. I know the question was about events, but I think this also impacts resources, and we've had a lot of conversations around making sure that after our resources are available to students, we've made sure that all of the administrators on call can communicate with international phone numbers and making sure that and that was, UCS helped us with that, to think through the things that students might be experiencing. We do our best to figure that out, but students know what their experience is, right? And so it's been really helpful to have that feedback. But yeah, I think really it's hard. And I think the reality of the situation is that it's not perfect and there are real challenges. And so we have staff and student activities who have shifted their schedules so that we have people around a little bit later. And so I think it really is, if there are students who still feel like they're not getting what they need or aren't able to participate, please don't hesitate to reach out and say, this is my experience. And we will do all that we can to help provide resources and access.
Thanks, everyone. Sort of a related question, but on a broader scale, another student was curious to know a bit about how does Brown work to address racism, or instances of racism that have been reported. Dean Delalue, could you give us a high-level overview of what that looks like?
Sure, I would be happy to. In instances where a person feels that they were mistreated on the basis of what's called protected class, we will, and that includes race, sexual orientation, religion, a host of things, gender, etc. And we can make that information available to all those on a call. There's a link on the OIED website. We have processes, two things. One is a bias incident reporting system. So if you feel like you experienced a bias incident based on race, or someone who experienced a bias incident, you can put a report in. We have a group that meets on a regular basis and reviews those bias incident reports. The main purpose of our bias incident reporting system is to make sure our community members have immediate support upon reporting. It's not an adjudication process. It is designed to, again, ensure that individuals get connected to resources right away. Separate from that, bias incidents are defined differently than discrimination and harassment. However, a bias incident could be discriminatory in nature. It gets a bit confusing, but there are people in my office who will happily walk you through any and all of those things if you have questions. So there's a discrimination and harassment policy. If a person feels like this was discrimination, they can fill out our discrimination complaint form. You'll be contacted by one of the equity officers in the office, and they will walk you through the discrimination process. Discrimination is a term under law, so it has a particular threshold to be determined as discrimination. And so we don't use that word loosely because it does have a formal definition. We, again, have a glossary of terms on the OIED website that we can make available so that individuals know how we define bias incident versus discrimination and or harassment here at Brown.
Thank you, VP Delalue. Jason, I think you have the next question queued up.
Many students currently on leaves of absence have chosen to remain in the Providence area, either due to lease obligations or other, life circumstances. And as you all know, those currently on leaves of absence are non-eligible for university testing. However, these students are also many of our roommates and our pods and our friends, and are effectively still part of the broader Brown community. And so I wanted to ask what you all's thoughts are on mitigating risk of community spread because of students on leave.
Exactly, but we also now have Vanesa Britto here, Dr. Britto, who could also speak to that, but go ahead if you want.
I just wanted to just address it for students on leaves of absence, and just to say, Jason, of course, students on who are on leaves of absence are still members of our community, as are many of the recent alumni who live in the Providence area, our close friends and neighbors. Many of us live in homes where our partners or our roommates or our housemates are not in the testing protocol. And my best encouragement to everyone is to continue to follow the public health guidelines that we hear from Dr. Britto and others, right? That is to keep socially distant, to wear masks, to try to limit our activities with others to outside of the community. I'll turn it over to Dr. Britto, but I just want to say that this is, it's not just about the students on leaves of absence. We are all responsible to the Providence community and those around us. And I appreciate everything that you and our students are doing to help support that.
Thank you. I agree with you, Dean Zia. I think that I do also want to start with feeling proud of the community and the ways in which students are supporting each other, whether they're on campus, whether they're commuters, whether they're in residence, off campus, on leave. We are still one community. It's true, Jason. I also recognize that the community, the broader community, is supporting, let's say, the greater Providence community with testing sites that have been made available, and there are more of them. Testing is something that the governor has absolutely made a priority, and so we'd certainly encourage students to avail themselves of the testing that is available to them in the community around campus.
Thank you very much. Dr. Britto, we're receiving another question related to sort of mental health and the challenges that this pandemic situation sort of creates on mental health for students. Can you give us a sense of how the university is handling mental health for students? And maybe VPSCs can weigh in on that as well.
Sure. I mean, I think the most important thing is that we support students wherever they find themselves and wherever they are in need. So, if a student, for example, needs individual counseling, that's still continuing to be available for students. We are sort of preemptively connecting with students who are in isolation or quarantine, just to kind of check in and be available and supportive if people need it or want it. We're also, there are a number of workshops and support groups that are being offered for students to avail themselves of. And certainly want to infuse the work of CAPS in some of the activities that, for example, Joie and Be Well and others are helping to plan and organize for students. So, there's a lot of collaboration happening. Some of it is behind the scenes, and so it might not be readily apparent to students, but certainly folks in CAPS' staff are happy to work with people and are available to work with people. Still seeing students either same or next day as needed. And certainly we are collaborating with folks in lots of different other areas, again, sort of behind the scenes, but certainly there and have a presence.
I don't have much to add. I think I'd emphasize just and pull out 2 points that Dr. Britto made that I think, CAPS work in the years before the pandemic have really paid off in terms of there being a strong resource for students during the pandemic. And the first is some of the creativity that has gone into things like scheduling or emergency care that has reduced wait times but strengthened care. And that's something that was very important pre-pandemic, but I think has been equally, if not more important in terms of accessibility during the pandemic. I think the staff of therapists becoming much more compositionally diverse pre-pandemic has been incredibly helpful in terms of their ability to support as with strong care communities that are perhaps right now disproportionately being impacted around their mental and emotional well-being. And then finally, I think the ability for them to have moved so quickly to a teletherapy model in March is another example of a structure that has, I think, gotten used to over time, being able to be sort of creative and responsive to what student needs are. So I think what I'd pull out of what Dr. Britto was sharing is just some of the important work that happened pre-pandemic to provide stronger services to students has actually really helped during the pandemic as well, because we know that these resources have never been more important.
I think we hit on a really important point earlier when the student asked about international students and time zones. And so I wanted to bring us back to that conversation because a lot of students submitted questions surrounding that, specifically in regards to academics. This is largely for Dean Zia and Provost Locke. How has the university supported students who are not able to be in Eastern time zone, and I guess international students more broadly?
Jason, thank you for the question. And I would say that many of the strategies, as you remarked, are similar to those that you shared for UCS and that Joie shared for activities. Among them, though, the most important is just helping to share information with one another and feedback with one another. And so one of the things I was very glad about is that there were many instructors before this semester even began who are asking us to share with them information about where students were residing so that they could plan ahead for their course materials. And I'm grateful that about 2/3 of the students completed the pre-semester survey that we sent out, sharing with us their time zone information. That was shared with all of your instructors. We also helped to set up our colleagues in Computing and Information Services and the Digital Learning Design team helped to change CAB helped to change Canvas so that Canvas includes information about which students are here locally and which students may be studying remotely so that people can take that into account for their planning. As you noted, there are still some events for which we try to have synchronous timing. And when we do that to the greatest extent possible, we've encouraged people to record those events and to allow asynchronous modes of interaction. If you look at the fall 2020 academic policies, you'll see some notes about that, some guidance that we've provided. And then also for those things that we know are coming, an example of an upcoming event is pre-registration. You will know as a senior that pre-registration traditionally happens at 8 a.m. On a particular morning. And 8 a.m. was a great time before because it didn't conflict with classes, but it wasn't a great time in terms of reaching the most students we can. For this year, pre-registration, the timings will happen at noon. Now that isn't a perfect timing, but that actually captures a great number of our students within a range of time zones. And we hope that that students will be able to plan ahead for that event. I'll turn it over to Provost Locke.
Yeah, let me just add a couple, just a few more words to what Dean Zia already offered. I think as we were preparing for this semester, we were very clear that a number of our students would be studying abroad, either because of their choice or because of visa and travel restrictions, not their choice. And so we wanted to do two things. One is for the professors to make sure that they were aware of that, and then wherever possible, if their course was being offered fully online, to try to do that asynchronously. If they were teaching in a synchronous way, like the course that I'm teaching this semester, then to make sure that everything was recorded so that it was accessible to students who may not be able to be there during the regular meeting time, and for the faculty to communicate to those individual students other ways of participating, other ways of connecting, et cetera. As an instructor teaching this semester, it was of great value to me to receive the information from the college of the students enrolled in my class, how many of them were in different time zones. And that information really helped me think about the exercises, the format, the delivery, et cetera. And I know that was true for very many of my colleagues. But in addition to the kind of operational side of things that we were doing, I know that the Deputy Provost, the Associate Provost Asabi, Paloma and Global Brown has done a really terrific work reaching out to our international students on a variety of issues, since this has been a tough time for them, not just because of the logistics of studying, but because of a lot of policy decisions that are beyond our control, making sure that they feel supported and that they are supported as we continue this academic year. And I think that combination of outreach to students and trying to think about how we deliver our education are things that we've been doing to support our students. We are open to any other suggestions that UCS or any students may have on how we can best support our students internationally, but also domestically.
Just as you suggested, Jason, that you're available at hours to help meet with people, I am so thankful that faculty and staff across the university have done that. Many of us are dealing with circumstances that are quite different than before, perhaps with childcare or elder care issues or the disruption of modern life. But I have seen faculty holding office hours at all hours of the day to try to connect. The best moments that I've had, and I know that many of our colleagues have been when we're able to speak with you through office hours, through meetings, through this weird interface that is Zoom. So please, if you want, reach out to your instructors. They want to hear from you. They want to be connected to you. They want to help support you in any way they can.
Thank you, Dean Zia and Provost Locke. And as a Brown alum, I can say that the power of reaching out to your community cannot be overstated. The next question I want to direct more towards President Paxson and Provost Locke. We received a number of questions in this regard. And the spirit of the question is two parts. First, when will we know if sophomores are allowed to return in the spring? And then the second part of that question is, will sophomores have an online option if they're not able to return in person?
I will start with that. As I said in my remarks, we're looking carefully at both the health situation at Brown, which is looking good, and the health situation in the rest of the country, which is not so good. I want to let people know what the plans are by the end of this month, because people need to decide what they're doing, and I think the uncertainty for students is really tough. Whatever happens, yes, I mean, the mantra here is choice. So students can take classes remotely. They can, for sophomores, they can take classes in the summer if they want. Hopefully we can have everybody back on campus who wants to be here. We're still working that out. But that's the plan right now, which is, yes, as much choice as possible, given the health constraints that we're under.
Everything that we're doing is being guided by the public health situation and how we can best protect our community. The plan that we asked, the academic planning that we did over the course of the summer with the different departments assumes that all students who are currently here stay, and that first year students arrive. That's the original best plan. Whether or not we can deliver on that plan is, as President Paxson said, depends on the circumstances, and she will communicate that by the end of the month. If students are not able to study on campus, as a number have chosen not to already this semester, of course they can continue to take courses remotely online.
Jason, I know you had a question you had in mind.
Thank you. So a student from the Q&A asks, the university has committed to racial justice work, not just within our school, but also the broader Rhode Island community. However, Rhode Island does have thousands of incarcerated people. Can you all speak to your thoughts on supporting an enrollment program at Brown for incarcerated people in the Rhode Island penal system, not just to help out with easing the transition out of criminal justice, but to democratize education?
Bit about that. Thank you, Jason. And some of my colleagues may want to add. So this is something we've looked at in the past couple of years. And I think, there's some really interesting work happening at Brown right now. So there is a program, a lot of people have taken Professor Remensnyder's really fantastic course, and a growing group of faculty who are doing work in carceral studies. And through that program, we've had some joint courses taught with Brown students and students who are in institutions in Rhode Island, and that's worked pretty well. The other route is through the Rhode Island Community College. So our Rhode Island Community College is charged with, they can officially offer courses for credit to students who are in prisons. And so what Brown faculty and some graduate students can do is actually be appointed as faculty member at Rhode Island Community College and then teach in the prisons. And they've done some of that. I have to say, I find this whole thing a little bit frustrating because there's not enough space in the prisons to really hold a lot of classes. There's no way that anything can be done remotely. And we're finding that remote education actually can work pretty well. And of course, this year in the middle of the pandemic, it would be very unsafe to have Brown students or faculty members visiting prisons with the risk of introducing COVID into that sort of environment. So, you know, I guess my hope, and maybe it's unfounded hope, I don't know, would be that coming out of this, we could start a conversation around and saying, look, you know, there's a way we could get our classes into those prisons remotely if we can make the right investments and we can, you know, put the right protections in place so people aren't looking at stuff they shouldn't look at or misusing the technology. But absent that, I think anything we do is going to be pretty small scale just because of the constraints of the system. I would add two other things we're doing that maybe don't quite address your point, but I think they're things that are important. We have had formerly incarcerated students come in through the ROO program. I think that's an avenue that has worked well. The other program that Brown is involved with that I'm really pleased with, and we've been a member for a long time, is the Building Futures program. This is a program that brings young men and women in Rhode Island into the building trades. So it's something that's done in collaboration between the state, unions, and employers like Brown. And they get, people who participate in this get additional education. They wind up with an associate's degree. And what Brown agrees to do is to make sure that Building Futures apprentices are involved in any construction program that we do that's over, I think the threshold is $5 million, which is in the world of construction, not a very big price tag. And so we've had great experience with Building Futures apprentices at Brown, and they've done well. The one reason why I'm noting it in the context of this question is a fairly substantial fraction of the Building Futures apprentices have had experience being incarcerated. And the thing that's really great is the rate of recidivism among those apprentices is really small. And what it does is it provides a demonstration that if you give people opportunity, they don't go to prison, or at least much less likely to. So that's another interesting way that the university is trying to work on this issue.
I'm seeing a number of sort of academic related questions coming in from Q&A. And I'll pose it to Dean Zia and then other folks can chime in. So the first question is it possible for students to enroll in a part-time basis in the spring semester, potentially taking 1 or 2 classes online for a reduced fee rather than 4 or 5, like first years are doing currently?
So thank you for the question. Please know that Brown is a full-time enrollment institution. We don't have a method of part-time enrollment. What we offered to first-year students this semester was something truly special. It was 1 free course before they began their formal studies. So the first-year students this semester are not yet degree candidates at the university. That will happen. They will matriculate in January. And please know that this is to the great advantage of students in general, right? So Brown doesn't do a per course charge. We have an expectation of 4 courses as full-time study, but students are allowed to take between 3 and 5 courses. And I am so glad that so many Brown students begin their studies some semesters considering 5 courses. So in what we would encourage you to do is to make the choices that are best for you around full-time enrollment in the spring. If you're not comfortable coming back to campus, then please feel free to enroll remotely. If you are a student who wants to wait until the summer in Rhode Island is beautiful. And I see that there's this other question on the chat thread asking about the academic offerings. You can look at some of those courses that are available online. If you go to courses at Brown, cab.brown.edu, you can look ahead and see some of the summer offerings. And there are a wide range of courses. And And I hope that it'll be a time of continued connection on campus. We would hope that the public health situation is going to get considerably better every term. And so there are advantages I could see to both semesters.
Can I just add in with a plug to Rhode Island summers? They really are. For students who've only been here, you go through a kind of rainy, cold spring and then you leave before the best part. So it really is, it's a beautiful place. The beach is close by. And I think we will put together a really special summer experience for our first year students, but also for other students who decide that's the right option for them.
I was going to ask a quick follow-up, Dean Zia. Would you mind speaking to why Brown isn't a part-time institution or why it is a full-time only institution?
One of the reasons, Jason, is that our hope is that students can explore all of their interests. And there is an advantage that goes through the process, for example, of shopping, of looking at your courses, of having academic advising, and to have all of the supports that we can offer you while you're a full-time student, oftentimes in residence, but now we're able to offer remotely. If students are, I think the question around this one or two courses is that I know that many students are concerned about their pathways to their concentrations. And please know that a deep part of all of the planning that the faculty and departments did this summer was trying to figure out all of the possible pathways. If you're a student who is enrolled in fall and spring, if you're a student that went on leave perhaps in the fall and wanted to come back, if you're a student who is doing fall and summer. And so I think that oftentimes people are beginning this question about part-time enrollment around a particular class. How do I continue my studies as I would like if I'm not here this semester? And what I would encourage any student to do in those circumstances is reach out to the college@brown.edu, reach out to an academic advising dean. Let's talk through those circumstances, because we really have tried to do everything we can to make sure that there are no barriers. And I really do think that I would say that and add that this right now is a difficult time. We are not able to engage in many of the ways that we normally do. We believe deeply in education as a way to connect people and to change the world. And at a time when there may not be other opportunities for connection, I would encourage people to continue their full-time studies in so much as they can. And so I would understand why people might want to delay and be here in the summer, because the summer is wonderful. But I do think that there is an advantage to concentrating your effort, to having that mix of classes, to having that mix of interaction that is the college experience at Brown.
Thank you, Dean Zia. And for our final question, I'd like multiple panelists to sort of weigh in. We know, as Dean Zia mentioned, that it's a pretty difficult time for everyone for myriad reasons. But what are some of the things that students can look forward to, either by your department or your division, in the upcoming year? Let's start with Joie Steele, and then I'll have a couple other colleagues weigh in.
I was hoping you would start with me. We have a lot of things that I'm really excited about. So starting with the events that President Paxson mentioned, and we're kind of calling it a Hella Week of events. And so in the service of wanting to be inclusive of all students, some of those will be virtual, but some of those will be in person. And this will be one of the first times that we've been able to come together in person in, I've lost track of time, but maybe 7 months. So we're really excited about that. And all of those events will be in Today at Brown and on the Campus Life Instagram and on the Brown Instagram. And we also, when it comes to election evening, we will have staff on campus as well that night for a couple of reasons. One, we know that students have kind of gotten used to being on campus, and a lot of us are at home and communicating virtually. And we want them to know that night, we know it can bring up a lot of emotion for a variety of reasons. We're going to have probably about 35 staff all over campus on the main greens. And so we'll be on Riston, Simmons, Main Green, and Pembroke Green, not to be confused with Pembroke Field. We'll have candy apples and caramel apples for you to come by and grab, which I'm very excited about. And it'll just be a space, if you just need to talk to someone in person, we will be there, we'll be with you, and we'll be in community with you. So I'm really looking forward to those opportunities. I want to quickly say thank you to student leaders who have been incredibly understanding and patient as we navigate through this really complex time. They have been incredibly creative. We've had almost 100 events virtually registered in the past 4 weeks, in the past month. So they're being incredibly creative, but also they're being really understanding that this isn't ideal and it's not exactly what we all would like to be doing. And so I just need to say thank you to them for that.
I just want to end by thanking everybody, my colleagues who are here to answer questions, the many people who are working behind the scenes to make this the best experience we possibly can. But again, to thank the students. I was at a meeting not long ago and somebody said to me, like, how is Brown doing this? And the answer was, our students are doing this, right? They're the ones who are making this successful. They're the ones who are keeping it healthy. And we don't expect perfection, but we really appreciate everything that you're doing. So I look forward to seeing you on Halloween. I'll be there and getting that candy apple. And again, just wish you the best for the rest of the semester. Thanks.
Thank you, President Paxson, and thank you all the panelists and all the students who were here for the town hall. This event, again, was being recorded, and we'll find a way to make sure it gets to you when the time is right. In the meantime, please stay healthy and safe, and remember to vote. Take care.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.